Hello, everybody, and welcome to Draft Meta Update for Week 1 of Neon Dynasty. In this video, I'm going to be providing you with all of the most up-to-date information on Neon Dynasty, so you know what to do in your next draft. Before I dive in, I want to remind you that if you enjoy this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel for more draft content, and comment below with your questions, thoughts, and feedback. Without further ado, let's get started. In this video, I will be discussing the format news, the meta market, and Nicolai's sleepers. And I'm Nicolai, so these are my sleeper picks. Starting off with the format news, Samurai slip in the standings. It's been a rough first week for these red-white warriors. Be they goblin, be they human, they are not really finding ways to get wins as easily as some of the archetypes in the format. They are by no means unplayable, but they are a little bit weaker and should generally be avoided unless they seem quite open. The synergies just aren't coming together as well as could be hoped, and you probably need to have some good uncommon support or good rare support to be moving into this archetype, because you don't really want to be doing it just for commons. As the format continues to develop, we'll keep you posted on how this archetype is doing, but currently they are not doing the best. Next up, shrines protest their meme status. The red shrine, blue shrine, black shrine, red shrine, and green shrine, all of which are Go Shintai, which is a brotherhood of sorts, I would guess, among the shrines, maybe a union of sorts. They are gathering together and trying to not become the memes that shrines in the past have been. Generally, shrines are really tough to use because they are uncommons and they're spread across so many colors, and they are really hard to keep around and trigger and all of sorts of that stuff. But these shrines are a little bit different. They're creatures, so they can interact with combat. They can actually protect you while they get the ball rolling. And they also are really powerful when you can get them in multiples. So don't sleep on the shrines. They may not be memes. We'll have to double check after a little bit more of the format, but a lot of them seem quite powerful after playing with them a little bit. And as the format develops, I guess we'll find out more. But generally, the shrines have been performing pretty solidly, and I think they're going to be a role player in the format for sure. Finally, in the format news, your champion is, and by champion I mean champion of the Streamer Showdown Tournament. In pod play, we had 2 pods of excellent streamers, including 4 Hall of Famers and yours truly. In the finals, not only did I make it, 3 Hall of Famers made it, and then DeathZ, After Office TTV, and the Ham TV also made it. And then the final champion was After Office TTV. Congratulations to the Latin American content producer. Really doing excellent work with his deck. It was an absolute powerhouse, and big congrats to him for winning the tournament. In case you're curious, I finished in 5th overall out of the 16 participants, so a pretty solid performance, and you can find videos of my runs in the first pod and in the finals already posted on YouTube. Let's get to the meta market. One of the key things to evaluate is how strong each color is doing in the format, so you know which ones to bias towards, which ones to bias away from. And after the first week of play, these are how the colors are looking. Black rockets out to an early lead, followed closely by green. Blue, somewhere in the middle, hasn't really adjusted much away from the median, and then white is a little bit weaker than average, and red really tanking down to the bottom of the standings. What does this mean for you? Well, if you have a close pick between a black card and a red card, maybe take that black card so that you can potentially end up in a stronger color that pairs well with the other colors a little bit, so you can end up in a better deck overall. It's also important to note, though, that as players catch on to this factor, more players are going to start drafting those black decks, and the red cards are going to be going around the table a little bit later, so you're still going to be ending up with powerful decks in all of the colors. It's just you're more frequently going to get strong cards in black, and so that may be a more contested color as the format goes on. Red may be a little bit less contested, and so it generally tends to balance out. But early days, you may get an advantage on your opponent by knowing that black is performing the best, red the weakest, green doing pretty well, white a little bit weaker, and then blue doing solidly just right in the middle. Moving on to the archetype gradings or archetype power rankings in the format. It's always strong to assume that they're going to start out roughly equal, because it's really hard to predict which archetype is going to perform best. But after a week of play, these are how the archetypes have broken down. As I mentioned in its very own slide, the red-white samurai attack alone deck is performing relatively weak. At the moment, it's not really able to push through damage as effectively as would be hoped, and as a result, a lot of those cards end up performing like relatively vanilla creatures that aren't statted the best. Blue-black, on the other hand, is performing pretty well. It's one of the top archetypes in the format, using those ninja synergies, pushing through that damage, and being relatively sneaky throughout the entire process. Green-white enchantments didn't necessarily look like it had as much support as would be needed for a deck to be a powerhouse in the format, but it's just got pretty solid synergies, and the cards all work really well together, so green-white is one of the top decks in the format. Blue-red artifacts is a little bit weaker, a little bit inconsistent, but it can still be a powerful deck in the right circumstances. It just gets a little bit of a hit because you kind of need the right pieces to come together. As an example, After Office TTV won the Streamer Showdown tournament piloting a incredibly powerful version of blue-red artifacts, so the pieces are there. It's just a little bit harder to assemble, which is why the deck does get a little bit of a knock. Black-green, on the other hand, performing great, just rock-solid cards up and down the curve, really like straightforward game plan, and the cards just slot into place quite nicely. So a nice deck to be the top dog at the moment. Blue-white vehicles, on the other hand, getting a little bit of a knock just because it's a little bit inconsistent slightly, but still pretty much right around that average performance. Red-green, struggling a little bit just because red's cards are a little bit weaker, and green's cards don't always support the aggression that red is trying to do, and so it gets a little bit of a weaker rating in the format, though it does have some truly terrifying starts and can be a challenge to defeat if it gets the right cards rolling. And then finally, rounding it out, just some decks that are performing slightly above average, basically right at the median performance of decks. Black-white just performing rock solid, green-blue performing pretty well, which is nice to see after it's been struggling a little bit in recent formats, and just because of the channel mechanic, it has stuff to do early game and late game. And then finally, black-red artifacts doing quite well. It's got just a great little synergy package that can truly be a powerful performer, and I actually drafted a red-black deck in the first pod of the Streamer Showdown to great effect, so if you want to see it in action, you can check out that video on my channel. So, moving on to Nikolai's Sleepers, the final section of this meta update, starting off with Ecologist's Terrarium. I think that splashing is something that you will quite often be doing in this format, quite often relative to other formats. It's not like you're going to be splashing a majority of the time, but it is relatively easy to do because there are gain lands in the format, so dual lands that you'll be able to gain access to relatively easily, and then there is a decent amount of fixing in green. And then Ecologist Terrarium is especially nice because it gives you a piece of fixing that isn't reliant on green, so you can splash in your non-green decks a little bit easier. It also can be working for modified synergies. If you are splashing and maybe have some modified overlap in the colors that you're playing, it can be just a nice little key piece and also be an artifact and a permanent that you can interact with and just be a nice little role player in a lot of decks. And so I think the Ecologist Terrarium is really a nice card to be aware of in the format. I think it does perform a little bit better than it looks because it does look a little bit slow and clunky to use. And then my second pick for a sleeper card is Imperial Oath. This card, I've been able to pick them up relatively late in the drafts, and it's just been a pretty powerful card to play on turn 6. The Scry 3 part of this card looks like a little bit of, like, it kind of doesn't take up a lot of words, but it really does add a lot of power to this card because it means you're going to be drawing something good next turn. And if you aren't going to be drawing something good next turn, at least you're not going to be drawing terrible cards for 3 turns, which is really powerful to add to 3 tokens that are really going to help lock up the board if you're playing a defensive strategy, and oftentimes can be pretty terrifying aggressive threats as well if you have some ways to buff them up, like equipments or some of the samurais that give buffed stats when you attack with a creature alone. Imperial Oath can really just play that role well, and it also combines decently in multiples, because if you play an Imperial Oath and Scry 3, oftentimes you're going to be able to find another Imperial Oath, and one thing I was able to do was play 3 Imperial Oaths in a relatively short amount of turns and just have 9 samurais in play, and even if my opponent has a few blockers, they're not going to be able to stop themselves from taking like 12 damage by 6 unblocked samurai coming at them. So Imperial Oath can definitely be a terrifying card if you can get a few of them, and even though it's a 6-drop, I think it's a card that's worth investigating for your white deck, so that's why it comes in on the sleeper list. Definitely give it a try. And that is going to do it for this episode of Draft Meta Update. I really do hope you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that thumbs up button, comment with your questions, and subscribe for more content. And leave hashtag New Age in the comment section down below if you did make it all the way till the end, because each week is like a new age of the format, because the meta is constantly changing, and the Neon Dynasty is a new age for Kamigawa. You can also, if you did enjoy this video and have been enjoying my videos in general and want to support my content, you can check out the Patreon linked in the description down below, patreon.com/NicolaiBolas. It is a place where you can go to help support my videos, gain access to unique rewards, and help the content continue to churn and come out in a reasonable fashion. So I really do appreciate all of my patrons. In the description, you can also find links to the NicolaiBolas Discord server, the NicolaiBolas merchandise store, the NicolaiBolas Twitch stream, and all sorts of stuff like that. So check out the description for more goodies, and check out the rest of the channel for tons of draft content. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.